I need to tell you something that cannot wait. Right now, as you're hearing these words, there is a cosmic frequency activating in the universe that only occurs once every 30 years. This is not hyperbole. This is not another casual astrological observation. What's happening in the celestial architecture right now is creating a window of accelerated learning so powerful that certain individuals are being given what I can only describe as an evolutionary advantage. And if you felt an inexplicable urgency lately, a strange pressure in your chest, or a sudden clarity about patterns you've been blind to for years, you're already inside this activation. But here's what most people don't understand. This cosmic window isn't open for everyone equally. The universe operates on principles of resonance and readiness. And there are 6 specific zodiac signs whose energetic blueprint is uniquely designed to receive this transmission. These are the signs who possess something rare in the human experience. The ability to learn from a mistake once and never, ever repeat it again. You might think that sounds like common sense. Everyone learns from mistakes, right? But that's not actually true. The painful reality is that most human beings are trapped in loops. They fall into the same relationship patterns. They make the same financial errors. They trust the same type of person who betrays them. They sabotage themselves in identical ways, year after year, sometimes for entire lifetimes. The psychological research is clear on this. Pattern repetition is the default setting of the human nervous system. We are wired to repeat what's familiar, even when it destroys us. But not these 6 signs. Something in their soul architecture is different, and I'm going to show you exactly what that difference is. Why it matters more now than ever before, and how you can tell if you're one of the chosen few who will use this cosmic window to break free from every limiting pattern that has ever held you back. Let me ask you something. Have you noticed in the past 3 to 4 weeks that your tolerance for your own excuses has completely evaporated? Have you caught yourself in the middle of an old behavior and felt an almost physical revulsion, as if your body itself is rejecting the pattern? Have you experienced moments where you can see your entire life from above, like watching a movie, and suddenly the plot makes perfect sense in a way it never did before? Then you're feeling it. The shift is already inside you. Your energy field is recalibrated, and what I'm about to share will help you understand why this is happening and how to work with it instead of against it. The 6 zodiac signs I'm talking about are Scorpio, Capricorn, Virgo, Aquarius, Sagittarius, and Gemini. Now, before you click away because you're not one of these signs, stay with me. Because even if you're not one of these 6, understanding how they operate will teach you the mechanics of unstoppable learning. And more importantly, if you have these signs prominent in your chart, your moon, your rising, your Venus or Mars, you carry this gift too. This isn't about sun sign astrology. This is about energetic wiring. So what makes these 6 signs different? Why are they the ones who can touch fire once and never need to touch it again, while others keep burning themselves over and over? The answer lies in something I call the pain to wisdom conversion rate. Every human being experiences pain. Every soul encounters failure, betrayal, loss, and disappointment. But not every soul has the same capacity to convert that pain into usable wisdom. For most people, pain just becomes trauma. It gets stored in the body, buried in the subconscious, and then it runs their life from the shadows. They don't learn from it. They just carry it. But these 6 signs have a different internal mechanism. When they experience pain, something activates. Rather than shutting down or numbing out, they turn toward the pain with a kind of surgical curiosity. They need to understand it. They need to extract the lesson. They need to know exactly what went wrong, why it went wrong, and how to ensure it never happens again. This isn't about being smart. This is about being wired for evolution at the soul level. Let me break down the specific energetic signature each sign, because understanding the mechanics will help you recognize this pattern in yourself or others. Scorpio is the alchemist of the zodiac. This is the sign that rules death, transformation, and rebirth. Scorpio energy doesn't just learn from mistakes, it dies to the version of itself that made the mistake. When a Scorpio touches a hot stove, they don't just remember not to touch it again. They fundamentally transform their relationship to heat, to risk, to trust. They go into the underworld of their own psyche and they don't come back up until they've extracted every ounce of wisdom from the experience. This is why Scorpios often seem to have lived multiple lifetimes in one body. Because energetically, they have. Every major mistake is a death and rebirth cycle. And once they've been reborn, the old pattern is literally not available to them anymore. It's not that they resist it. It's that they've evolved past it. Capricorn operates differently but with equal power. This is the sign of the master strategist. The long game player. The one who understands that every action has a consequence and every consequence is data. Capricorns have what I call consequence consciousness. They are wired to see the future implications of present choices. So when they make a mistake, they don't just feel bad about it. They run a full diagnostic. They map out the entire chain of decisions that lead to the error. They identify the exact moment where they deviated from their integrity or their strategy. And then they build a new system to ensure that deviation is impossible in the future. Capricorns don't repeat mistakes because they treat every mistake like a structural failure that requires a redesign. They are the engineers of their own evolution. Virgo brings a different flavor to this unstoppable learning capacity. Virgo is the sign of discernment, analysis, and purification. When Virgo makes a mistake, it's almost physically painful for them because their entire system is oriented toward improvement and refinement. Virgos have an internal quality control mechanism that is constantly scanning for errors, inefficiencies, and misalignments. So when they stumble, they don't just notice it, they obsess over it until they've identified the root cause. And here's the key, right? Virgo doesn't just want to avoid the mistake. They want to optimize the entire system so that the mistake becomes impossible. They're not interested in willpower or discipline. They're interested in creating conditions where the right choice is the easiest choice. This is why Virgos often seem to have their lives together in ways that baffle other people. It's not that they're perfect. It's that they've systematically eliminated the pathways to their most common errors. Now let's talk about Aquarius. Because this sign's learning mechanism is perhaps the most misunderstood. Aquarius is the sign of the revolutionary, the innovator, the one who sees patterns that others miss. Aquarians learn from mistakes not through emotion but through pattern recognition. They have the ability to zoom out and see their life as a series of experiments. When something doesn't work, they don't take it personally. They simply note that this particular approach yielded this particular result, and they file it away as data. This emotional detachment is actually their superpower, because they're not attached to being right. They can pivot faster than any other sign. They can abandon a failing strategy without ego getting in the way. And because they're always looking at the bigger picture, they can see how a mistake in one area of life is actually connected to a pattern in another area. This systems level thinking means that when an Aquarius learns a lesson, they often fix multiple problems at once because they've identified the underlying pattern that was creating all of them. Sagittarius brings the energy of the eternal student, the philosopher, the seeker of truth. But don't mistake their optimism for naivety. Sagittarians are unstoppable learners because they have an insatiable hunger for growth. They are genuinely excited by the opportunity to expand their understanding. So when they make a mistake, they don't spiral into shame or self-criticism. They get curious. They want to know what this mistake is teaching them about life, about themselves, about the nature of reality. Sagittarians have the ability to reframe failure as adventure. And this reframe is not just positive thinking, it's a genuine shift in perception that allows them to extract wisdom without getting stuck in the emotional weight of the error. They move fast. They learn fast. And they don't look back because they're too busy integrating the lesson and moving toward the next horizon. And finally, Gemini. This might surprise some of you because Gemini is often stereotyped as scattered or inconsistent. But here's what people miss. Gemini is the sign of the messenger, the communicator, the one who processes information at lightning speed. Geminis learn from mistakes because they have an extraordinary capacity for mental flexibility. They can hold multiple perspectives simultaneously. They can see how they were wrong and also understand why they made the choice they made. This dual awareness means they can learn the lesson without getting trapped in self-judgment. Geminis also have the gift of being able to articulate their lessons, which means they integrate them more deeply. When you can explain what you learn it, you own it. And Geminis are constantly narrating their own growth, constantly updating their internal story, constantly revising their understanding. This makes them incredibly adaptive. They don't repeat mistakes because they're always operating from their most current version of truth. Now here's where this gets really important. These 6 signs have always had this capacity. But what's happening right now in the cosmic architecture is amplifying it to a degree we haven't seen in decades. There is a specific planetary alignment occurring that is creating what I call a karmic acceleration window. This is a period where the normal timeline of cause and effect is compressed. Lessons that would normally take years to learn are being delivered in weeks. Patterns that would normally require multiple lifetimes to break are being shattered in a single moment of clarity. And if you are one of these 6 signs, or if you have these energies prominent in your chart, you are being given an unfair advantage right now. The universe is handing you a golden ticket. But here's the catch. You have to be awake enough to use it. Let me tell you what's actually happening on the energetic level. Because this is where most astrology content fails you. They tell you what's happening, but they don't tell you why it matters or how to work with it. Right now, there is a convergence of Saturn, Pluto, and the North Node that is creating what ancient astrologers called a truth revelation transit. This is not a gentle, flowing energy. This is a cosmic eaton. Every area of your life where you've been lying to yourself, every pattern you've been pretending doesn't exist, every lesson you've been avoiding, it's all being brought to the surface with an intensity that can feel overwhelming. But here's what you need to understand. This intensity is not punishment. This is compression. The universe is compressing your learning curve because there's an evolutionary leap available to humanity right now, and not everyone is going to make it. That sounds harsh, but it's true. We are in a time of collective awakening. And awakening is not comfortable. It requires you to see things you've been avoiding. It requires you to admit where you've been wrong. It requires you to let go of identities and stories that have kept you safe but small. And these 6 signs, they're built for this. They don't just survive these transits, they thrive in them. Because their nervous system is wired to turn pressure into diamonds. They know how to take the raw material of failure and forge it into wisdom. They know how to metabolize pain into power. But let me be very specific about what this looks like in real life. Because I don't want this to stay abstract. I want you to see yourself in this. I want you to recognize the pattern so you can consciously work with it. Think about the last major mistake you made. Not a small error, but a real mistake. Something that cost you. Maybe it was a relationship that blew up. Maybe it was a business decision that failed. Maybe it was a moment where you betrayed your own values and had to live with the consequences. Now, here's the question. How long did it take you to stop making excuses for it? How long did it take you to stop blaming other people or circumstances? How long did it take you to look in the mirror and say, I did this, I chose this, and I need to understand why? For most people, that process takes months or years. Some people never get there. They stay in the story of victimhood or bad luck for their entire lives. But for these 6 signs, that process happens fast. Sometimes it happens in real time. They can be in the middle of the mistake and already see it for what it is. They can feel themselves making the wrong choice and simultaneously understand why they're making it and what it's going to cost them. This is not self-sabotage. This is radical self-awareness. Let me give you a concrete example. I worked with a Scorpio client a few years ago who had a pattern of attracting emotionally unavailable partners. She would meet someone, feel an intense connection, ignore all the red flags, dive in completely, and then be devastated when the person couldn't show up for her. This had happened 4 times in a row. But on the 5th time, something shifted. She met someone new, felt that same intense pull, and this time she stopped. She didn't ignore the red flags. She didn't override her intuition with hope. She sat with the discomfort of the attraction and asked herself, why am I drawn to this? What am I trying to heal through this person? What part of me believes I don't deserve someone who is actually available? And in that moment of inquiry, the entire pattern collapsed. She saw it. She saw how she had been using unavailable partners to avoid the vulnerability of real intimacy. She saw how she had been recreating her relationship with her father, who was physically present but emotionally absent. She saw how the intensity she was addicted to was actually a trauma response, not love, and once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. The pattern lost its power. She walked away from that 5th person, and she never repeated that mistake again. Not because she was trying hard to avoid it, but because she had fundamentally transformed her relationship to intimacy. The old pattern was no longer available to her nervous system. That's what I mean by unstoppable learning. It's not about willpower. It's not about discipline. It's about reaching a level of awareness where the old behavior is simply not an option anymore because you've evolved past it. Now let's talk about Capricorn. Because their mechanism is different but equally powerful. I had a Capricorn client who was a serial entrepreneur. He had started and failed at 3 businesses in a row. Each time, he lost money, time, and confidence. But here's what was remarkable. Each failure was different. He never made the same mistake twice. The first business failed because he didn't validate the market. The second failed because he hired the wrong team. The third failed because he ran out of capital before reaching profitability. 3 different failure modes. And by the time he started his 4th business, he had built a system that addressed all 3 vulnerabilities. He did extensive market research before building anything. He developed a rigorous hiring process with multiple checkpoints. He raised more capital than he thought he needed and managed cash flow with obsessive precision. That 4th business succeeded. And it succeeded not because he got lucky, but because he had systematically eliminated every known failure point. This is Capricorn energy. They treat life like a game of chess. Every move is strategic. Every mistake is analyzed. Every failure is reverse engineered to extract a lesson. And they don't just learn the lesson, they build infrastructure around it so they can't forget it. They create checklists, systems, processes, and accountability structures that make the right choice automatic. Do you see the difference? Most people learn a lesson and then hope they remember it when the situation comes up again. But hope is not a strategy. These signs don't rely on hope. They rely on structure. They change their environment, their habits, their systems so that the lesson is baked into their daily life. Now let's talk about Virgo, because this is where it gets really interesting. Virgo's superpower is not just learning from their own mistakes, it's learning from other people's mistakes. Virgos are observers. They watch. They notice. They see patterns in other people's lives and they think. I'm never doing that. They have the ability to extract wisdom from second-hand experience, which means they can avoid entire categories of mistakes that other people have to learn the hard way. I know a Virgo woman who has never been in debt. Not once. Not even in her 20s when most people are figuring out money the hard way. And it's not because she came from wealth. She grew up in a working-class family. But she watched her parents struggle with credit card debt. She watched her friends make impulsive purchases and then stress about bills. She watched people finance lifestyles they couldn't afford and then lose everything in a recession. And she decided early on, I'm not doing that. She built a life around financial clarity. She tracked every dollar. She saved aggressively. She never bought anything she couldn't pay for in cash. And now, in her 40s, she has a level of financial freedom that most people never achieve. Not because she earned more than everyone else, but because she never made the mistakes that drain most people's resources. This is Virgo's gift. They don't need to touch the stove to know it's hot. They can see someone else get burned and integrate that lesson as if it happened to them. This makes them incredibly efficient learners. They compress decades of trial and error into a few years of careful observation. But here's where I need to address something important. If you're reading this and you're not one of these 6 signs, you might be feeling discouraged. You might be thinking, well, I guess I'm just doomed to repeat my mistakes forever. And that is absolutely not true. What I'm describing is a natural capacity. But natural capacity is not destiny. Every human being can develop the ability to learn from mistakes and never repeat them. It's just that for these 6 signs, it's their default setting. For everyone else, it requires conscious cultivation. And here's the good news. We are in a cosmic window right now where that cultivation is easier than it's ever been. The energetic support is here. The acceleration is available. You just have to choose it. You have to decide that you're done with the loops. You're done with the patterns. You're done with the excuses. And you're ready to become someone who learns fast, adapts quickly, and never steps in the same trap twice. So how do you do that? How do you develop this capacity if it's not your natural wiring? Let me give you the exact process. Because this is not theoretical. This is practical, actionable, and it works. First, you have to develop what I call mistake awareness. Most people are not even conscious when they're making a mistake. They're on autopilot. They're running old programming. They're reacting instead of responding. So the first step is to slow down enough to notice when you're about to repeat a pattern. This requires you to know your patterns. You have to be able to say, this is my thing. This is what I do. I attract this type of person. I make this type of choice. I sabotage myself in this specific way. If you don't know your patterns, you can't interrupt them. Second, you need to develop consequence consciousness. This is the Capricorn gift, and you can learn it. Before you make a choice, pause and ask yourself, if I do this, what happens next? And then what happens after that? And then what? Play the movie forward. See the future implications of your present choice. Most mistakes happen because people are only thinking one move ahead. They're thinking about the immediate gratification or the immediate relief. But they're not thinking about where that choice leads. Consequence consciousness is the ability to see the entire chain of cause and effect before you pull the trigger. Third, you need to build what I call learning rituals. This is the Virgo approach. You need a structured process for extracting wisdom from experience. I recommend a weekly review where you sit down and ask yourself 3 questions. What worked this week? What didn't work? What am I going to do differently next week? This sounds simple, but most people never do it. They just move from week to week to week, reacting to whatever comes up, never pausing to integrate the lessons. But if you do this consistently, you will start to see your patterns. You will start to notice when you're about to make the same mistake again, and you will start to course correct in real time. Fourth, and this is crucial, you need to develop emotional resilience. Because here's the truth. The reason most people repeat mistakes is not because they don't know better. It's because they can't handle the discomfort of doing something different. The old pattern is familiar. It's comfortable, even if it's destructive. It's known, and the nervous system prefers known pain over unknown possibility. So if you want to break your patterns, you have to be willing to sit with discomfort. You have to be willing to feel the anxiety of not knowing how it's going to turn out. You have to be willing to tolerate the vulnerability of trying something new. This is where Scorpio's gift becomes essential. Scorpio teaches us that transformation requires death. You have to be willing to let the old version of yourself die. You have to be willing to grieve the identity you've been carrying. You have to be willing to step into the unknown without a guarantee of safety. And that is terrifying for most people. But it's the only way through. Let me talk about Aquarius now. Because their learning mechanism is perhaps the most revolutionary and the most needed in this moment. Aquarius doesn't just learn from mistakes, they redesign entire systems based on what they discover. When an Aquarius makes an error, they don't just fix that one thing. They look at the entire framework that allowed that error to occur and they ask, What needs to change at the structural level? I worked with an Aquarius client who kept burning out at work. Every 2 years. Like clockwork. She would hit a wall. Complete exhaustion. Physical symptoms. Mental fog. And each time, she would take a break. Recover. And then go back to the same intensity. But after the third burnout, something clicked. Instead of just resting and returning, she stepped back and looked at the pattern from a systems perspective. She realized that the problem wasn't her job or her workload. The problem was her entire relationship to productivity. She had internalized a belief system that equated her worth with her output. And that belief system was running in the background of every choice she made. So she didn't just change jobs. She didn't just set better boundaries. She completely rewired her identity. She started measuring success differently. She built new metrics for what a good day looked like. She created structures that forced her to rest before she needed it, not after she collapsed. And most importantly, she shared what she learned. She wrote about it. She talked about it with friends. She helped other people see the same pattern in their own lives. This is classic Aquarius. They don't just solve their own problems, they create solutions that can help the collective. They turn personal lessons into universal principles. And this is why Aquarius energy is so critical right now. We are living in a time where the old systems are breaking down. The old ways of working, relating, living, they're not sustainable anymore. And we need people who can look at the wreckage and say, okay, what do we build instead? What's the new framework? What's the upgraded operating system? Aquarians are the architects of the future. They learn from the past not to repeat it, but to transcend it entirely. Now Sagittarius brings something different to this conversation, and it's something that often gets overlooked. Sagittarius is the sign of meaning making. When a Sagittarius makes a mistake, they don't just analyze what went wrong, they ask what it means. They look for the philosophical lesson. They want to understand how this experience fits into the larger story of their life and their growth. I know a Sagittarius man who went through a devastating divorce. His wife left him for someone else, and it shattered him. But instead of staying in bitterness or victimhood, he went on a journey, literally. He traveled for 6 months, processing the grief, asking himself the hard questions. What was I not seeing? What was I avoiding? What was this relationship teaching me about myself? And by the end of that journey, he had completely reframed the experience. He stopped seeing it as a failure and started seeing it as a liberation. He realized that he had been playing small in that relationship. He had been dimming his light to make his partner comfortable. He had been abandoning his own dreams to maintain a false sense of security. And once he saw that, everything changed. He came back from that trip a different person. He started pursuing goals he had shelved for years. He started speaking his truth even when it was uncomfortable. He started choosing adventure over safety, and he never fell into that pattern again. Not because he was trying to avoid it, but because he had extracted such profound meaning from the experience that it became a catalyst for his entire life transformation. This is Sagittarius magic. They can take the most painful experiences and turn them into fuel for expansion. They can find the gift in the wound. They can see how the breakdown was actually a breakthrough in disguise. And this perspective shift is not just positive thinking, it's a genuine alchemical process that transforms suffering into wisdom. And finally, let's talk about Gemini. Because I think this sign is the most underestimated when it comes to learning capacity. People see Gemini's changy ability and they mistake it for inconsistency. But what they're actually witnessing is rapid integration. Geminis process information faster than any other sign. They can take in data, analyze it, synthesize it, and update their worldview in real time. This makes them incredibly adaptive. I have a Gemini friend who is a master at relationships. And I don't mean she's perfect, I mean she learns fast. Every relationship she's been in has taught her something specific, and she never makes the same mistake twice. She dated someone who was emotionally unavailable, and she learned to spot that pattern in the first conversation. She dated someone who was controlling, and she learned to recognize the early warning signs of that dynamic. She dated someone who was conflict avoidant, and she learned how to create safety for difficult conversations. Each relationship was a different curriculum, and she graduated from each one with new skills. But here's what makes her truly remarkable. She can articulate exactly what she learned. She can tell you the specific behavior she's looking for now. She can explain the red flags she won't ignore. She can describe the kind of partnership she's building toward. This clarity is the result of her Gemini gift for language and communication. When you can name something, you can work with it. When you can articulate a pattern, you can interrupt it. When you can explain a lesson, you own it. And this is something everyone can learn from Gemini energy. Start narrating your own growth. Start putting words to your patterns. Start explaining to yourself and others what you're learning. Because the act of articulation is the act integration. When you can tell the story of your transformation, you solidify it. It becomes real. It becomes permanent. Now here's what I need you to understand about this moment we're in. This is not just another transit. This is not just another astrological event that will pass and leave everything the same. We are in the middle of a collective initiation. Humanity is being asked to evolve or repeat, and the universe is not subtle about it. The lessons are coming fast and hard. The patterns are being exposed with brutal clarity. The consequences of unconscious living are becoming impossible to ignore. And if you are someone who has been doing the work, if you are someone who has been committed to your own growth, if you are someone who has been willing to look at your shadows and your patterns and your wounds, this is your time. This is when all of that work pays off. Because the people who have been developing their learning capacity, the people who have been practicing self-awareness, the people who have been building emotional resilience, they are the ones who are going to thrive in this new paradigm. But you have to make a choice. You have to decide right now that you are done repeating yourself. You are done with the loops. You are done with the excuses. You are done blaming circumstances or other people or bad luck. You are ready to take full responsibility for your life and your choices and your patterns. And you are ready to become someone who learns fast, adapts quickly, and never steps in the same trap twice. This is not about perfection. You will still make mistakes. You will still stumble. You will still have moments of unconsciousness. But the difference is light. You won't stay there. You won't marinate in it. You won't build a home in your dysfunction. You will catch yourself faster. You will course correct quicker. You will extract the lesson and move forward with more wisdom than you had before. And here's what happens when you live this way. Your life starts to accelerate. Because you're not wasting time repeating the same lessons over and over. You're not stuck in the same relationship drama for 5 years. You're not making the same career mistakes for a decade. You're learning, integrating, and evolving at a pace that most people can't even comprehend. And this creates momentum. This creates power. This creates a life that feels like it's actually going somewhere instead of just spinning in circles. Let me give you one final practice that ties all of this together. I call it the pattern interrupt protocol, and it's simple but profound. Every time you notice yourself about to repeat a pattern, I want you to stop and ask yourself 3 questions. First, have I been here before? Second, what happened last time I made this choice? Third, what would the upgraded version of me do right now? That's it. 3 questions. But if you ask them honestly, they will change everything. Because the first question brings awareness. The second question brings consequence consciousness. And the third question brings possibility. It reminds you that you are not stuck. You are not doomed to repeat. You have the power to choose differently right now in this moment. And if you do this consistently, if you make this a practice, you will start to notice something remarkable. The old patterns will lose their grip. The old behaviors will start to feel foreign. The old version of you will start to feel like a past life. And you will step into a new way of being that is so much more aligned, so much more powerful, so much more true to who you actually are. This is what's available right now. This is the gift of this cosmic window. This is the opportunity that only comes once in a generation. The universe is handing you the keys to your own evolution. But you have to be brave and